So instead, I will invite to the stage tout seul Thierry Chignon. And Thierry is basically bringing an investor perspective to bear on this discussion. He's a senior partner at Mérieux Développement, which is an evergreen fund established by l'Institut Mérieux to invest in innovative healthcare companies. It has 4 focus areas, all of which are pertinent to today's discussion in various ways: in vitro diagnostics and life sciences tools, medical devices, patient management services, and preventive medicine and nutrition. Thierry, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. How should I get the first slide? Shall I press?
I would give it a shot.
I try. Not yet. Okay, perfect. Yes, slightly different from what you've heard up to now. And keep in mind that this presentation was supposed to come just after a presentation about some regulation by Jean-Claude Gislin, ASM. So I will try to make it as clear as possible. Just to present who we are very quickly, Mérieux Development is an investment fund or organization more acting as a family office of the Mérieux family inside the Institute Mérieux, dedicated to healthcare, but inside healthcare mainly medical technologies, as it has been mentioned earlier on. So we are not investing in some drug, and you may understand why it's important for the rest of my presentation. We are performing 2 types of investment: early stage companies, i.e. startups, so more venture activity, and the late stage companies profitable, and that will be growth equity. Our recent last vehicle is is precisely 150 million, and we're usually acting as an active minority shareholder. And when I say active, it's because I would like to point out what's written in the red or the underlined sentence in the red box, which says that because of the Institut Mérieux environment on the corporate companies such as BioMérieux, Mérieux Nutrition, and so on, having a strong expertise and experience in some dedicated field, that's number 1. Number 2, being present in more than 150 countries with some actual subsidiaries. What we are trying to provide to our portfolio company is to leverage this unique expertise. So we are trying to provide more than funding, as I mentioned it on. So I've been asked, because I hope some companies in the room, smaller companies, could be looking for some investment. What we, our investors, are looking for. This slide will be more general, as you would expect, and the other one will be more specific to the customized approach. First of all, we do like innovation. Everybody's speaking about innovation. Should it be incremental or disruptive? Depends. I really do not care, but it should cover some specific unmet need somewhere in the healthcare process. That's important. Having said that, and maybe that's more important for disruptive innovation, it's great to have something which is completely changing the practice, but it could be very difficult to manage afterwards, especially for a small company. So that's why I put the second bullet point, indicating avoid changing too much, I would say, the medical practice. Because if it's changing dramatically the medical practice, it will take an awful amount of time in order to become the standard of care, and that could be very difficult for some smaller companies. Of course, IP is an important one, so strong IP protection, or if no IP, if we are more in the servicing to patient, home care, or home care, yes, that's one. Having a very strong know-how. So that's the first one about innovation. Second one, large market. Of course, we can, in the medtech sector, contemplate some very large markets. What's even more important is to ensure that those markets are achievable in different geographies. And I just usually North America, Europe, of course, because we are part of it here, and Asia are important for us to consider, especially if we want to leverage our international expertise. Market access, that may be one of the most important ones. Most of the companies coming to us got usually some strong technical expertise. They do know how to develop their product, That's usually pretty well understood. But when it comes down to clinical evidence, or clinical proof of concept or superiority is starting to be a little weaker. So if I could insist on that, having a clear understanding of what are the actual clinical trial requirements is absolutely paramount in order to be convincing, and not just to grant or to be granted market clearance, such as a 510K or a CE mark in Europe, but to be convincing enough afterwards to ensure some type of commercial success. And by saying so, I'm just excluding the next bullet point, which is about reimbursement and pricing. Just in terms of convincing the users what will be, if being the physicians, for example, afterwards, you may include at a pretty early stage some comparative studies. I would prefer personally to invest in a clinical trial with some comparative studies instead of just having the minimum, granting a CE marking and then having to start it again from scratch. Reimbursement is an important one because it's nice to be able to sell a product, but if nobody is going to pay for it, it's pretty useless. And just believing, and especially, maybe I've got this big European bias, but just believing that because the product is good, is superior, patients are going to pay for it with some money out of the pocket, usually does not fly for a long time. If it can be reimbursed, of course. So again, at the time of deciding about your clinical trials and setting up some specific protocols, ensure that you will include some clear, understandable, and ideally demonstrative medico-economic information or gathering the relevant data in terms of medico-economic so that it would be used afterwards in terms to convince the payers. Market access is a very important one. This is to reach the market and to get some chance, of course, of being able to sell your product. Then there is an important one, which is about marketing strategy. Does the company has understood precisely how they are going to manage the commercialization of their product? It's always amazing to see this magic revenue or hockey stick, you know. Just by saying, okay, I will hire few commercial people and you'll see what you will see. Well, usually it never works. Do they have a clear understanding of whether their technology will be used some specific, dedicated, limited, expert clinical center, which could be good, by the way, difficult to convince, but at least there's a few numbers of them, so the resource could be somehow pretty limited, or should they go to see a lot of individual physicians all over the place, and that will require different type of resources. So that's very important to consider, and again, especially on this last bullet point, we usually have almost very limited, if not no information. Last but not least, the team. I like to say to the younger ones of our team, there are three major criteria, so I make it shorter than your slide, which is people, people, people. If we do have the relevant team in front of us, we should be able to make something good. So, team, of course, experience is better, serial entrepreneurs, that's great. Having been successful, it's usually reassuring, even though if they have performed some mistakes, and they have understood their mistakes and they're able to explain them, I would definitely consider that as being a good experience. And being ambitious with a positive way of thinking of the wording, which means, especially for us, having some international objectives so that we can leverage our expertise. So that's what we're looking for generally. Now, of course, because of the customized approach, I've been asked whether or not I'm ready to invest in terms of on those types of technology. So keep in mind, we are not investing in the pharma drug side, we are investing in the medical technology side, and therefore when you think about personalized medicine, without being exhaustive, that would be mainly companion diagnostic or imaging or type of software device that would help to better analyze the patient and to ensure or to improve the likelihood of success of the drugs that could be utilized. So, big question for me, because I've seen quite several dossiers in this area. is a company, startup in front of us, going to develop independently from the pharma company? If it's a yes, so they're trying to manage that for, again, I should say, a proprietary drug product. If it's the case, there's a big question about the feasibility of the clinical trial in particular. How are they going to manage some data of their companion device without being able to access some of the information which is from the pharma company? Big question. Do they have to re-perform some data? How can they get the molecule? That's a very big burden, which up to now I've not seen some good way of I should say, performing that. Just consider it has been managed and the file is good. How is a small company, a startup, going to manage with the payers? Keep in mind, on one side, the pharma company will be, understandably, willing to sell their product to a target population which could be as large as possible. And the small company is going to try to convince the payers that they should restrict the targeted population to be more efficient. Difficult two-way discussion at the same time. Marketing capacities, of course, are going to be difficult. So, in a snapshot, there's an issue because of the negative perception of what they're developing for the pharma company and the pharma business. Now, going back to the first question, if not being developed independent from a pharma company, of course, it's an easier development. That would be a cooperative or any kind of partnership you could think about. But there is a big point to be considered, is that what is the exact intention of the pharma company in terms of development plan and timing to be successful? I've experienced in an investment in a servicing company, startup to a pharma company. Their product was great, how should I say, efficient for the pharma company, but the timing of a pharma company when they say we're going fast is not as fast as what the startup would expect. And from time to time, the startup company could be running cash out just because it's not happening as quickly as expected. I've still got 2 minutes.
I'm getting a little bit concerned about time, but...
Okay. I made it clear, very, very quick, and that's my last slide, don't worry. IP rights, how are they going to be shared? Any type of gross margin, how is it going to be shared? And of course, exit strategy will be pretty limited. I've said that, and I don't want you to keep this negative message as an investor for those involved, for example, in companion diagnostic. The situation, of course, is far different if we're speaking of a generic drug, for example, because in that case, the situation is very different, and it could be far easier. Or, again, if there is a strong pressure from payers, because payers now are more and more wondering whether or not the target population is very well dedicated for the efficiency of the product. I will just finish with that last point. I was amazed 3 or 4 weeks ago on the French TV news. By the end of the day, there was a French representative of a company that you know named Celgene, who makes this statement, very, very strong statement, by saying, yes, our products are more and more expensive. Yes, it's an actual cost for the payers, our social security system, but we are ready to reimburse the social security system whenever the treatment is not efficient. Of course, it's dramatically difficult to demonstrate that, so he's still having a good time in front of him, but it's coming. It will come sooner or later. Thank you.